everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. It's Karen here with another installment in our Hats All Folks crochet series. So if you're new here, every year I work on a themed series. And so the first Wednesday of every month is a crochet project related to that series. So for 2025, we're working on Hats All, folks. So it's all things to do with crochet hats. So for the month of June, we are working on this ball cap. Now I have to tell you guys, I really have never done a ball cap before. I've done tons of hats, all kinds of styles, but a ball cap was not one that I'd done before. And so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to tackle it. And as you will see in the tutorial, everything is tickety-boo except for the fact that based on the measurements, I made the depth of my hat too long. It's too deep. So the cool thing is I did make a ponyhole. So if you've got long hair and you like to wear a ponytail with your hat, I've included that in this project. Now, again, you can see it just sits too low. And so I followed the measurements of the hat sizing chart. So that's one of the items that you will be downloading when we talk about the material. So it looks a little something like this, and it's a free download on the Crochet Crafty website. And there's a bunch of other downloadables on there. And so the size of this hat is actually meant for a child, which is basically the head size of a child between the ages of 4 and 12 are going to be relatively the same. So it's basically from child to young adult. And then for a full adult, you would just kind of have to stretch the circumference a little bit. But my size is for a child. So when I went to the chart, which I'll talk about further in the tutorial, it told me that my depth needed to be about 7.5 inches. Now I stopped at about 6 inches because I wanted to add this pony hole. Now, really what I should have done is I probably should have stopped at about 5 inches. And then that would have given me grace to add the pony hole and not add so much in the depth here. So I just wanted to explain that right off the bat because I don't want to confuse you guys to thinking this is the way that it should look. And like I explained further in the tutorial, if you want to actually make this for the winter to have like a hat that looks like a ball cap and you're happy with having your ears covered, then you can follow along perfectly with this. But traditionally, it's not supposed to go all the way down like that. And not to mention the brim, although it gives fantastic shade, it practically just covers the whole face. So that's kind of the thing I'm not happy with. So it should actually, and this mannequin here is actually too big. I couldn't find my child's mannequin. You guys are getting all kinds from me today. So if I just pull this back a bit. So really, it should be sitting more like that, where, from the side profile, I should still be able to see the eye, but it provides a nice amount of shade, and then you've got it here in the front. Now, I'm really happy with actually the size of the brim and the shaping of it. So that I think came out really, really well. The only thing is the little depth here, which we're gonna go through in the tutorial. However, the basic method does work. We start this project from the top and work our way down. So you start with the crown, then you work the body, and of course we do the pony hole along with the body. And then the last thing we work on is the brim here, okay? So I think you're still gonna have a lot of fun working on this project. And I talk a lot about how you can size it differently in the tutorial. So without further ado, the next thing you're gonna see is all the materials you're gonna need to gather to create your hat. I did this with two strands of yarn together, which is perfect because that's exactly what helps you create just enough stiffness so that your brim will sit nice and stiff like that without flopping forward. And again, I talk all about that in the tutorial. So guys, without further ado, I hope you have fun crocheting your very own ball cap. All right, so the first thing you should set aside is your crochet hat sizing chart. And we have this for you free on the crochetcrafty.com website. I will leave a link to it in the description box down below. It's a free download and it's a great resource tool for creating any type of hat garment. So make sure that you have the sizing chart with you on hand. And then the yarn I'm going to be using is a medium 4-weight yarn. And actually, this is some leftover yarn I had. And coincidentally, I just thought these two colors would go fabulous together. So I am going to be crocheting with 2 strands of yarn together. Okay, and this is going to give me a little bit more sturdiness, if I can find the end here, in my project. So just to show you, I'm going to bring these 2 pieces of yarn together, and we will work with them as if they are one. So both of these are medium 4-weight. This happens to be loops and threads, which I found to be very comparable to the Bernat premium yarn. And I love working with these yarns, as many of you guys know. And in case you are wondering what the color is I'm using here, this is simply called mauve. And this one, what do they call it? Oh, pink macaroon. Okay, so you won't need the 2 full skeins, but if you want to do 2 colors, I would definitely get 1 skein of each, obviously. If you want to do it in 1 color and you want to do the double strands, you just use the strand from the inside and then the beginning from the outside, and you can use them together. You will have more than enough with just 1 skein, okay? And the hook size I'm going to be using for today's project is a 5mm hook, which is also known as an H or a size 8 if you go by those labels. And I'm actually, this is normally a smaller hook than I use. In fact, yeah, this is a 5.5 is what they're recommending. And I usually will use a 5.5, but because I want my stitches to sit a little bit more snugly for this particular project, I've gone down to a 5, okay? As always, make sure that you have a yarn needle on hand to weave in your ends and a handy pair of scissors to snip your yarn. So once you've got all your materials together, you're going to be ready to start stitching up your hat. Okay, so I'm just using the center pull of both of these skeins. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin with a cinch circle. Okay, so this hat is worked from the top down. So I'm just going to go in like that and pull up a loop. So it's just like a slip knot, except we're not going to resolve. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through to chain and secure that cinch circle. And then I'm just going to bring that tail out there like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to work in the round. And in this particular project, we're going to work in the circular round. And actually, I should have said that you should have a stitch marker on hand. So let me grab one. It could either be a bobby pin, a safety pin, anything like that. There we go. So I happen to have a stitch marker on hand. So this is going to help you identify the beginning and the end of each of your rounds. Now, when we refer to our sizing chart here, what we're doing is we're creating the crown of the head. So that's the top part here. So even though they label the crown here, but this is the top view. So what we want to do is we want to create the width of this little circle here before we start to create the shape going down. Now this is a beanie, which is actually a similar shape to what we're going to do, but the idea is the same. Okay, so I know I'm making mine for a child between 4 and 12. So if I come here and I look at the hat crown size, which is also known as the diameter, I'm going to go to the size I'm making it for. So I'm making it for a child. I'm going to come across the way. And so I know that my diameter should be between 6 1/4 and 6.5 inches. And if you work in metric, it'll be between 16 and 17 centimeters. So just so you know, this chart is in both imperial and metric. So hopefully you'll find that extra useful. So that's what I'm going to go for. I'm probably going to do, let's say, I'm going to do about 6.5. Okay, I'm going to do 6.5 inches. So that's what we want our circle to get to before we start creating the shape of our hat. So for round 1, we're using single crochet stitches, and all we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook into the circle, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Now it's going to feel really thick because you've got 2 strands of yarn here. So just be patient. So I've got the second one, and I'm going to keep going until I have 6 single crochets in the center of my circle. So I've got 3 there. This is my 4th. I'm just going to pull that a little bit so I don't lose my tail. And this is my 5th. And this is my 6th. Okay, and once I have my 6 stitches, I'm just going to take my tail and I'm going to pull that. You see that? So it just cinches the stitches closer together and it creates the center being nice and closed, which I like. And then what you want to do is find the very first single crochet. Now it's going to look a little funny because we've got 2 different colors here, so it might be tricky to see. So where did my stuff go here? So what I tend to do is I tend to start from the stitch that my hook just finished creating, and I'll count backwards just to make sure. So we have 1, 2, 3. So you can see that's a stitch. 4, 5. Whoops, let me count that again. So we have 1, 2, okay, and then there's 3, there's 4, there is 5, okay. Now 6 is nestled here because see the first one always gets to be a little bit tighter, so that's our 6th stitch. So that's where we want to work into, okay. So we'll find that first stitch right there. And normally what we would do is slip stitch, but what we're going to do is we're just going to continue to single crochet. So you might just have to help that along because that first stitch is always a little tighter. Just like that. And you're going to pull up a loop, again, working with 2 strands. It'll be a little tricky, okay? And then we are going to just single crochet as usual. And at this point, because this single crochet now belongs to round number 2, I'm going to insert my little stitch marker there. So every time I come across my stitch marker, I know that that was the first stitch of the following round or of the previous round. Okay, so now you've completed round 1 with 6 stitches. Now we've begun round number 2. So in round number 2, what we're going to do is we're going to increase the number of stitches. So we are going to place 2 single crochets into each stitch all the way around. So we've technically already done our first one here. So we're going to go back into the same stitch and we're going to place 1 more single crochet. Okay, just like that. So there's 2 into 1 stitch. Now I'm going to go into the next stitch and I'm going to place 2 single crochets as well. So at the end of round number 2, you will have 12 stitches. And just take your time here because it can be a little tricky because you've got 2 strands working on your hook. Okay, so there's 2, and then I go into the next stitch here. And there is going to be 1 single crochet and 2. See that? So because I've got 2 strands as one, technically there's 4 strands here. So make sure that you're always picking up both strands as you work through it. Just like that. Okay? So continue all the way around until you have 12 stitches. Okay, so I have now come across that stitch marker and I know that that's the first stitch. So I counted from my hook all the way back and I have 12 stitches. So round 2 is now complete and we're ready to go into round number 3. So for round number 3, we are going to continue to place increases. That means 2 stitches into a stitch, but we're going to do that into every 2nd stitch this time. So I'm going to just take out that marker for a second. And into this first stitch, I'm going to only place 1 single crochet. And then immediately, I want to replace this marker. Just like that. Now into the next stitch, I want to place my increase, which is 2 stitches. So make sure that you don't just go through that first color here of stitches, right? See, that can be easy to do, but that's only 1 strand. We have to make sure that we're always going through that full thick stitch, just like that, okay? So we have 1, and then we have 2, okay? So into the next stitch is 1, and then we move into the next stitch and we place 2. Okay, so your pattern is 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, all the way around. And by the time you come up to your stitch marker again, round 3 should have 18 stitches. Okay, so round 3 is complete and I have 18 stitches all the way around. Okay, so we're ready to go into round number 4 and we're going to continue increasing, of course. So we keep increasing with each round until we get that diameter that we're looking for. So I'm going to keep increasing until I get about 6.5 inches. So what you want to do is increase the number of stitches every round between your increases. So in this previous round, we had 1 stitch between each increase. Now in round number 4, we're going to have 2 single stitches before we increase. Okay, so I'm going to take this stitch marker out and I'm going to place 1 single crochet. Then I'm immediately going to replace it. And then we have another single crochet into the next stitch. So we have 1 and 2 individual stitches. Now into the 3rd stitch, we're going to place our increase, which is 2 single crochets. Again, I know that the multiple colors here might make it tricky, but hopefully you can see that. So insert 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochet. Okay, so there's my repeat for this round. So into the next 2 stitches, I only place 1. So I have 1. Into the next one, I have 1. And into the 3rd, I place 2. 1 and 2. Okay. So continue doing that all the way around. And at the end of round 4, you're going to have 24 stitches. Okay, so I've completed round 4 and I have 24 stitches. So I'm going to go on to round number 5. And of course, the number of stitches in between is going to increase by 1. So in this round, we did 2 individual stitches before the increase. In this round, round number 5, we're going to do 3 individual stitches before the increase. So I hope you can see what the pattern is here. It follows the basic principles of crocheting a circle. What I'm going to do too is there will be a link down below to a tutorial or a crochet lesson all about the principles of crocheting a circle. And so you're going to continue following those principles until you get your desired diameter. Okay, so I'm just going to start you off again here on round number 5, and then I will set you loose because your diameter might be different than mine. So I'm going to start off by doing 3 individual stitches. So the first one is a single. And again, I want to replace my stitch marker immediately. And then I have the second one here. And then I have the 3rd one. Okay, so 3 individual stitches. And at this point, this is where I'm going to place my increase. So I have 1 and I have 2. Okay, and then I go 1, 2, 3, and 2. 1, 2, 3, and 2. So hopefully you can see the pattern here happening. If you're a little newer, I suggest you reference that crochet tutorial. If this hasn't been maybe as clear for you, I hope it has. I've gone nice and slow. If you're more experienced and you'll zip through this, you know what to do. Just continue with your increases. So in round number 6, then you would have 4 individual stitches between each increase. Round number 7, you would have 5 individual stitches before the increase, etc., etc. So you're going to keep going and creating your circle until you get your desired diameter. And for me, that's going to be 6.5 inches. So once I've got my diameter, I'm going to meet back up with you guys and show you how we're then going to shape the hat downwards. Okay, so I have reached my desired diameter, and I think it was just 1/8 or so short. Yeah, so I've got about 6 1/4 inches, and that's going to give me about 16 centimeters. So I'm pretty happy with that. And so I did a total of 11 rounds, and I now have 66 stitches. So in the 11th round, I was increasing into every 10th stitch. So there were 9 stitches in between my increases. So in the previous round, I had 8 stitches in between. I had 7 before that and 6 before that. So as you're working your way up, as I explained previously, you're going to increase the number of stitches between each increase. And so now I've got my desired diameter. So now we need to work on the depth. So this is where I'm going to grab my chart again. I'm going to bring it back over. So this is the crown, the top part we've created here. And now we want to create the depth of the hat, okay? So the depth is basically from the top of the head to about just covering the top part of the ear. And so I'm going to reference again. I'm working on a child size, so I'm going to go across the way here. And so my depth is going to be 7.5 to 8 inches. And so I think I'm going to stop at 7.5. We'll see. It could be 7 3/4. So this part is super easy because you don't have to calculate increases or how many stitches in between. You're simply just going to continue, and you're going to place 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around. So you don't have to worry about increasing or decreasing. I'm just going to take my stitch marker here. And yeah, so this part is the fun part because you can just stick on a movie or listen to a podcast and you just keep going for rounds and rounds until you get the depth that you desire. And then I will show you what mine looks like once I've created my desired depth. Okay, so just keep going like that until you reach your desired depth, and then I'll meet back up with you in just a little bit. Okay, so I have done an additional 11 rounds, and so you can see it's now curled, and so that's what creates the body of our hat. Now, I have measured it. Okay, so right now I only have 6 inches, but I wanted to stop here because I do want to make a pony hole. We all like those when we're wearing baseball caps. So this is what you would do to create that little opening here. So I just stopped short of where that stitch marker is to indicate the beginning of a new round. So this is what I'm going to do. Because we've been working in the spiral round, you can see how it doesn't ever really meet down nice and flush. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to camouflage that, and I'm going to take, actually I can put that stitch marker back for a second. I'm going to take 1 stitch out for a moment. Okay, and I'm just going to slip stitch into the last stitch here. So this kind of helps to smooth out that little join. I guess it's hard to see there. And so what we're going to do, instead of continuing the round, we're now going to work back and forth in rows. So what I'm going to do is we are going to chain 1 and turn our work now. And now we're going to work back around. Now I would recommend getting another stitch marker at this point. Let me just grab one here. So what I would recommend now is count 10 stitches from this, or backwards, I guess you could call it, from this stitch marker. So including this, we're going to count 10 stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And that should be plenty of room for a pony hole. And then that is where I'm going to insert my stitch marker there. Okay, so I'm going to single crochet all the way around till I hit this stitch marker. Then I'm going to chain 1 and come back around again. Okay, so I'm going to single crochet all the way around. When I hit this stitch marker, I'm not going to go into the stitch. I'm going to stop the stitch just before the marker. I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and then single crochet all the way back to where we started. And once you've done that, I'm going to meet up with you there to talk about how we're going to close up that hole there. Okay, I'm just jumping back in here for those of you that are a little newer. Just want to show you. So I'm just coming up to that stitch marker. I've got 1 stitch there. So I just finished that last stitch. I do not go into where the stitch marker is. I'm now going to chain 1. I'm going to turn, and now I'm just going to single crochet back into that first stitch. Okay, and then I just single crochet all the way back to the beginning. Okay, whoops. So what you want to do is create that little lip there, and then I'm going to go all the way back, and I'm going to come back to that very first stitch. Okay, so I'm just coming up to the last stitch here. Single crochet. Now this is where I slip stitch, so I want to just sneak in there just to make this look nice and even. So I'm just going to help it along here. There we go. So now you should have a little section that looks like this. So you've got a little opening there. And so now in total, you would have had 56 stitches, because remember, we always had 66 all the way around. We minus 10, so now we have 56. So what we're going to do now is we're going to close up this little hole here, and we are going to now chain up 11. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So we chained up 11, so 10 is to make up for the missing stitches back here. But I wanted to add an extra stitch so that there's just a little bit of give here in that opening. So when you're kind of pulling your hair through, you have a little bit of give here. So once you've got your 11 chains, then you are going to find that very first stitch, and you're going to slip stitch into that. And of course, it's probably going to be a little bit tight, so you want to help it through, just like that. And slip stitch. Okay, there we go. So now you can see where we're going with that, right? So that creates your nice little opening. And now what you're going to do is you are going to do one more finishing round before we then talk about moving on to our brim. So what that means is you're just going to continue on with your single crochets. But this time I do want to make sure that I chain 1, so you can see where the beginning of the row is, or round I should say. And then I'm going to go into the same stitch right there. Might be a little tight. And I'm going to single crochet. Okay, so this is my first stitch. So when I come back around, I want to slip stitch into there to end it off. So I'm going to just go ahead and continue on again. I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each and every single stitch as usual. Okay, so you're going to go all the way around. And then once you get to here, you want to place 11 stitches in this space. Now, you can either just go in through the space or go in through the stitch. If you can, I know sometimes it's tricky, I would recommend going into each of the chains, because that'll just keep everything nice and neat. If you don't, it's not a big deal. You can still fit all your stitches in there. I just think for these purposes, it just is going to give it a nicer finished look. So I'm going to go ahead all the way around, and then I'm actually going to meet up with you guys and show you how I work my way across here to finish off the bottom of our body. Okay. And so that's now the back of the cap, and then we're going to work on the brim. I'm just coming up here to the last stitch before our little opening here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to work into these 11 chains, okay? So I'm actually going to try and work into the chain as much as I can. So I'm just going to insert there. And that's what you're going to try and do. So I'm working through the underside of the chain just because for me, it's a little easier to see. So you're just going to find a nice spot there. So you're just going to try your best to find a nice little spot where it'll fit into the chain nicely. So you can see now it's coming across there. nice and evenly. And I'm just going to work my way to the other side here. Okay, and I have one more stitch left, and I'm actually going to try to put it through the top there. Just like that. And then we've come to the very first stitch where we started it all, and you're going to slip stitch to join here. Okay, so you're just going to insert, slip stitch to join, and there you go. There's a little opening. And so now we're actually, this part of the hat is actually complete. So what I'm going to do is I am going to fasten off, and I'm going to snip my yarn here. And actually, I'm going to take this out because I'm going to do the invisible join. So I'm now going to just pull that through. And this is where I'm going to grab my yarn needle. Okay, so I have my yarn needle here, and I'm going to do what I like to call the invisible join. So instead of slip stitching there, we're going to do kind of like a pretend slip stitch. So I'm going to insert my needle through that last, or the first stitch, I should say. Oops, let me pull that through. Just to kind of snuggle it in. And then I'm going to go back in through the top of the last stitch we just did. So see, that is the front loop and that is the back loop. So I'm going to go in through the back, down the center of that stitch. So I've got both of those loops there. And I'm going to pull this through. The tail is a bit too long here. And so now I just snuggle it in like that. And it blends in really nicely. So you don't have a knot or anything here. And it looks nice and smooth. And then what I'm going to do is I am just going to weave in this end. And then we'll be ready to work on the brim here. I'm going to continue to weave in the end. But so now you can see there's a nice little opening. If you've got long hair or ponytail, you can feed that through there. And I added that extra stitch just to give it a little bit of a dipped opening there. So there's lots of room there for it. Okay, so I'm going to finish weaving in this end, and then we're going to be ready to talk about the brim. Okay, so I have finished weaving in my end there. And there we go. So this is what we've got happening here now. And so it's time for the brim. So this is where we need to just do a little calculation here. So technically we now have 67 stitches all the way around, because remember we added an extra stitch here. So if you take this hat and you kind of fold it right there so you have your center point at the front, this is going to be the front and this is going to be the back. So generally, and I've seen brims done in a variety of different ways, but this is the method that I like to kind of go by. So I like to make my brims about 1/3 of the circumference of the hat. So let's do some calculations here. So we're going to ignore that extra stitch here at the back. So we're still going to stick to our 66 stitches. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that. Just have some scrap paper here. So 66 stitches. So I need to find 1/3 of that. So we're going to divide 66 by 3, and that's actually going to give us 22 stitches. So we know that our brim has to be 22 stitches, okay? So what we want to do now is with the remaining 44 stitches that we have left, that means if we have to have them evenly distributed on either side of the brim. So if I just draw the hat here, and we've got our brim, okay? Well, that really doesn't look like much of a hat, but hopefully you guys can visualize that with me. So the brim here, this is going to be 22 stitches. So that means we have 44 stitches left. So we've got to have half the stitches on this side and half the stitches on that side. So this is our brim. That means if you divide 44 by 2, you also have 22. So there's got to be 22 stitches going up. So that's the center back, and then 22 stitches going here. So you have an even number of stitches. So this is what we've got to do, is find the spots on our hat where we're going to start and end the brim. And then it's this section here that we are going to work up slowly, okay? So you want to take your hat. So this is why I had this folded this way, right? So I know this is my back, and this is my front here, okay? So a nice easy way to do it is that you can place a little stitch marker right here, and you could count this as the center front, and then just count 11 stitches back. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So this is where we're going to put my first stitch marker here. And you might be saying, well, why did you count 11? Because this hat is folded in half. So this is half of the brim. And so now I count another 11 on this side, and that's going to give me my 22 stitches. So when I counted 11, I actually included this stitch marker. So I am going to now count beyond the stitch marker another 11 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So right there is where I will place my other stitch marker. And that is the beginning and end of my brim. Okay, and I can take that one out because that's the center. Okay, so we know now that the brim is going to go from here to here, and that is the back. So if I just, again, fold my hat here. So this is approximately centered, which is good. And you can see that this opening here, the little pony hole, should be somewhat centered between these two markers. So the brim would be in the front, and the pony hole would be in the back. So that is perfect. Okay, so now we are going to pick up our yarn. And what I'm going to do is, instead of placing a slip knot on my hook, I'm just going to take this marker out. I'm going to insert my hook here, and make sure you're working with the right side facing out. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the hook to pull the yarn through. And then chain one. Okay, and that's going to secure the yarn, and now I'm ready to continue on. So, but before we continue, let's go back to our scrap piece of paper. So in order to make the brim flare out, so it's got a flare, but it also has to have a little bit of a curvature down. We're going to have to add some increases here. So for row number 1, what I want to do is I want to take my number of stitches and I want to divide it by 4. I kind of like that number, so that we've got some increases in a nice even spot. Okay, so that will create, so hopefully you can see that there, that will create the reason for your brim to have a little bit of a flare out. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I know I had 22 stitches, so let's divide 22 by 5. And of course we know it's not evenly divided. So what we're going to do is we're going to round down, and we're going to say 20 stitches. Those 2 extra stitches we're not going to worry too much about. So let's say we have 20 stitches divided by 4, divided by, oops, I meant divided by 4, because we're going to do 4 parts, and then it gives you 5. So I had 5 on the brain. So we round down to 20 to make it nice and even, and then divide it by 4. So let me back that up, guys. Sorry. 22 does not divide evenly by 4. So this is why we just rounded down to 20, divide it by 4, that's going to give us 5. So this means in order to have 4 spots where we start to flare out, it's going to happen into every 5th stitch. Okay, so that means in every 5th stitch, we're going to place an increase. So now I know you're still thinking, what happened to those extra 22? So what we're going to do is we're going to leave 1 stitch at the beginning of the brim and 1 extra stitch at the end. So instead of stitching 1, 2, 3, 4, and then increase on the 5th, we're going to stitch the first one and then count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then increase into the 5th stitch. So then you will continue 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th, you increase. In the 5th, you increase. In the 5th, you increase. And at the end, instead of having 4 stitches left, you're going to have 5 stitches left. So this is, you don't have to know this. I mean, the brim I'm creating, because it's for a child to a young adult, this brim play-by-play usually is going to be good for any size hat from young adult to adult. But I'm showing you kind of the method behind my madness in case you ever want to kind of manipulate your brim size for a different hat or a different size, maybe smaller, okay? So this is the method behind the madness. So if it's too much for your brain power, don't worry about it. Just follow along here. We're starting row number 1 of the brim. And so what we're going to do is we just kind of chain 1 to secure the yarn. So what we want to do is we're going to insert our hook and do a single crochet. So this is the first stitch I talked about that we're just going to just place and not count as anything. Then we are going to count 4 stitches. So we're going to place a single crochet into the next one, a single crochet into the next one. So that's 2. Then we have 3. Then we have 4. And now we're going into the 5th stitch where we're going to increase. So we're going to place 1 stitch and then 1 more back into the same stitch. Okay? So this is what you're going to repeat until you get close to that stitch marker. So I've got 2 stitches in 1. That's my increase. The next thing I'm going to do is 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th, I'm going to increase. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th, I'm going to increase. And then you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 stitches left, including at the stitch marker. Okay? When you're done that, I will meet back up with you to talk about row number 2. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end here, and I just want to correct something. I think I just said there was going to be 6 straight stitches, but it's not, because we have to still do an increase. We will have 1 extra stitch left. So we've done an increases here. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 5th stitch, so I've already done 1, so it should have an increase here. So I've already done a stitch, and we're going to do 1 more in here. Okay, and now this is the last stitch, and that's the extra one there, and we're just going to place 1 single crochet. Okay, so we went from 22 stitches to 26 stitches because we had 4 increases of stitches here. So at the end of round 1 of our brim, we now have 26 stitches. Okay, so now we're going to go on to row number 2. I think I said round. Sorry, we're working in rows now. And you can get rid of your stitch marker because now we're just going to work back and forth. Okay, so we're going to go on to row number 2. And this time what we're going to do is we want to divvy up our spacing by 3. So I have 26 stitches. Again, it doesn't divide evenly by 3. So we did a little roundabout. So it's going to give, so 26 divided by 3 is about 8.6, something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our work, and we are going to single crochet into the first 7 stitches, okay? But here's what we're going to do at the beginning. So row number 2, we're going to do a decrease because we want to give our brim a little bit of a shape. So we're going to insert into the first stitch as if we're going to do a single crochet, and then we're going to go into the very next stitch and pull up a loop. Okay, so you have 3 loops, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through all of them. So this creates a decrease, okay? So now we're going to single crochet into the next 5 stitches, Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So including that one that we decreased, we now have 6 stitches in total. And then what we're going to do is we're going to place an increase into the 7th stitch. So we're going to place 1, and then we're going to place 2 into the same stitch. Okay. Next, we are going to single crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, just like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to place an increase into the next stitch. So into the next stitch, we're going to place 1, and we're going to place 2. Okay. So we've got something that looks like that. And now all we're going to do is we're going to just single crochet into each of the next 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we've got 2 stitches left here. And we are going to decrease these 2 stitches together. So what we did at the beginning of the brim, we're going to do at the end. So we're going to insert and pull up, but don't resolve. Go into the next one, which was probably going to be a little bit tight because that was our first little knot there, and into the second one, and then yarn over and pull through all 3. I'll have to weave in that end. Okay, so row 2 is complete. So if I just place the hat there, it's not looking like much yet, but you can see that by giving the increases, it's actually flaring out, which is what we want for that to happen. Okay, so now we're going to go on to row number 3. And for row number 3, by the way, at the end of row number 2, you're still going to have 26 stitches. So we're going to go into row number 3, and you will always chain 1 and turn. And for row number 3, there won't be any increases here. We're just going to place 1 stitch into every stitch. However, we're still going to do a decrease at the beginning and at the end to give our cap a little bit of shape here. So the first stitch is a decrease. So I'm going to go into the very first stitch to pull up a loop, and then into the next stitch to pull up a loop. And I'm going to decrease these 2 stitches together into 1. Okay, just like that. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to continue placing 1 single crochet into each stitch across until I have 2 stitches left. And then those 2 stitches will be decreased together. Okay, so I've just done the decrease here for row number 3. So we're ready to go into row number 4. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And I'm still going to divvy it up into 3 parts, but I'm going to just move my increases further out. So I always start my brim with a decrease. So I insert and then insert and pull through. And now what we're going to do is we are going to just single crochet into the next 3 stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Whoops. And now we're going to place an increase here. So we're going to place 2 stitches. Okay, and now into the next 12 stitches, we're just simply going to place 1 single crochet. Okay, so here I've just finished my 12 stitches, and into the next stitch, I'm going to place an increase. Okay, so that's 2 stitches. And then I need to place 1, 2, 3, and actually it's only going to be 2 here. So it's 2 single crochets, and then the last 2 will be a decrease. So you're going to insert. Okay, so it's not going to be a perfect science, but it's just, again, to give you the general shaping of your brim. So we finished row number 4. Okay, and so now we're ready to move on to round number 5. So for round number 5, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And now we want to place the 2 increases a little further towards the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a decrease. So we have 1 and 2, and we bring these two together. And now we're going to place a single crochet into each of the next 7 stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I've got 7. And now into the next stitch, we are going to place our increase. So we have 1 and we have 2. Okay. And now we are going to just place 1 single crochet into the next 4 stitches. So this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so you can see it's rounding out nicely. Now we're going to place an increase here. So there's 1 and there's 2. And now we're going to single crochet into each of the next 7 stitches again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we have 2 stitches left. We always decrease the last 2 stitches. So we pull up and decrease. Okay, so we had 24 stitches in round 4, and we still have 24 stitches in round 5. So after every round, I like to kind of evaluate, what do I have here? So you can see the decreases are starting to give us a little bit of a shape. Every once in a while, you're going to see there's a little bump up. That's just because we chain 1 and turn. Do not worry about that, because we're going to do a finishing round at the end. That will smooth that out. But the idea is you want to be able to see the brim is flaring up, but it's also curling down a little bit. All right. And so the reason why we keep kind of switching up the number of stitches at the end is because you don't want your increases to always land in the same spot. Otherwise, you're going to start getting a point here. So you see now it's starting to smooth out a little bit, because previously our increases were further out here and they were just starting to become pointed. So I like to kind of give you the background for those of you that like to know the theory behind things. I know many of you like to understand these things so that you can use it for your own design. So that's why we do that. So we're still sitting at 24 stitches. And now we're going to move on to round number 6, or sorry, I keep saying round, it's rows. Row number 6, and this is not an increase row again. So this is just going to be simple 1 into each. So you will start as usual. You're going to chain 1 and turn. And remember, the first 2 stitches always get decreased. So you decrease here, and then you're just going to place 1 stitch into each. When you get to the last 2 stitches, you will decrease those 2 together. So at the end of row 6, you should now have 22 stitches. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And then I'll be ready to take you guys into row number 7. Okay, so we just finished row number 6 and we're ready to go into row number 7. We're going to chain 1, turn our work. As usual, we're going to decrease the first 2 stitches. So we have 1 and 2. Okay, and then after the decrease, we are going to do 4 single crochets, 2, 3, and 4, and then we get an increase here. So we place 2 single crochets, and now across the center here, we are going to do 8 single crochets. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we're going to do our next, we're going to do our next increase spot, which is right here. So we place 2 stitches, 1 and 2. And now we're going to do 4 single crochets, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as always, we decrease the last 2 stitches together. So we have 1 and we have 2. Okay. And row number 7 should still have 22 stitches. Okay. So you can see it's building up nicely. It's looking a little wonky because at the edge here, just because the edges are want to do that when we're doing decreases. But as I said before, we're going to fix that in a little bit. So right now we have something that looks, if you lay it flat, it looks like that, which I know is funny looking, but you're not going to wear it like that, right? This is why we have the increases. It's naturally going to curve downward, and that is how you're going to wear it. Okay, so we have a couple more rows to go, and so let's take you on to a row number 8. Okay, so now for row number 8, we're going to chain 1 and turn as usual, and this time we're only going to have 1 increase. So instead of kind of the 2 points here, we're going to try to place 1 increase only somewhere in the center. So we have 22 stitches currently. So it's going to be either stitch 10, 11, or 12, somewhere in the center. So remember, the first 2 stitches are always decreased. So this would technically be 2 stitches here. Okay. And so we're going to count 9 stitches in now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you can see that roughly this is coming up to the center. So in the very next stitch, we're going to place that increase here. So we have 1 and we have 2. Okay. And now we're just going to continue on to the end by placing 1 stitch into each. And of course, you go until you have 2 stitches left. And then we're going to decrease. Okay, so go here. And there's 1. And now we've got 2 stitches left, so we're going to decrease these 2 to 1. Okay, so there is row number 8. You can really see it's coming forward. And now and see, it naturally kind of wants to start curving down, which is what we want. So now our stitch count is down to 21. So we only did, even though we decreased twice, we did 1 increase. So our stitch count at the end of row number 8 is 21. And we've got, yeah, we're going to do one more. We're going to do one more row. So we're going to go on to row number 9. And we are going to go back up to our 2 increases, okay? So we're going to go back up to doing 2 increases right about here. Okay, so row number 9, chain 1 and turn. And we're going to decrease the first 2 stitches together. And then we're going to do 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then into the next stitch is where we're going to place our increase. So we have 1 and 2. And then what we're going to do is we are going to do 5 stitches across again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we have our increase here. 1 and 2. Okay. And then we're just basically going to do the next 5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then we decrease the last 2. So we have 1 and 2. Just like that. And we still end up having 21 stitches, okay? And then I'm just going to get my measuring tape here. And I was just researching, like on average, a brim, they say, is about, can be anywhere from 2.5 to 3 inches. So this is just shy of 2.5. And again, this is for a child to a young adult. So I'm going to leave it there because we're still going to do a finishing round, which is probably going to bump us out to about 2.5, maybe 2 3/4 inches. So I'm pretty happy with that. And so you can see that it's got a little bit of curve, just like that. If you want to, you can make one a little bit longer. It just all depends on your, your desired look. I'm going to leave mine as is. So the brim is finished at 9 rows. I'm not going to fasten off because, like I said before, we've got kind of what looks a bit funny because you've got this little jut here. This one's a little smoother, but we've got these little bumps. This is generally where those chain ones and the decreases came in. So we want to smooth this out. So this is what I'm going to do. We are going to continue on and we're going to do a finishing round here. So I'm going to chain 1, but I'm not going to turn my work. Now I'm going to work down the side of these rows to try and smooth this out. So I'm going to go right back into this stitch here where we did the decrease, and I'm going to place another single crochet. Oops, lost my loop there. Okay. And now I'm going to go down into the next row and I'm going to single crochet into that space there. So you're just going to want to eyeball this, try to find a spot to place your stitch. And now I'm going to go down into the next row, insert my hook and single crochet. So hopefully you can see that that's kind of going around the bend a little bit smoother now. See that? So then I'm going to go down to the next row. So usually I try to find where that decrease was implemented. And then we have single crochet. So you can see it's really starting to curl in, which is what we want. I'm going to go down to the next row and single crochet. And then I'm going to go down to that next row, single crochet. Okay. And then I'm going to go down to this first row here, single crochet. Okay, so you can really see that it's nice and smooth now, which is what we want. And then what we want to do, we have one more row that we're going to go down, but what we're going to do is we're going to decrease this row and merge it into the actual body of the cap. So I'm going to go down into the next row, pick up a loop, but I'm not going to resolve. I'm then going to go down where we start that first stitch before the cap, the first or the last stitch before the brim, however you want to look at it. So I'm going to insert my hook, pull up, and then I'm going to decrease these together, just like that, okay? So that's what's going to create that need for it to curl down under like that. See that? Look at how nice and smooth that is now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to single crochet around, and you can actually slip stitch if you want, if you don't want to create any more length here. I'm just going to continue on and single crochet because we had a little bit of give left when the depth of my hat wasn't the full 7 inches. So I'm just going to do a few here so you can see. See that? So when I turn it this way, look at how nice and smooth that is now. Now you've got something that looks much more like a cap. And so by continuing on, it's just going to make it nice and smooth. See, so when I look down, see, it gives it a nice curve. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do single crochets all the way around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet up with you when I've come up to my second last stitch, just to show you how I'm going to decrease to come back up to create that same little curve. Okay, so I have 1 stitch left here. So now what I'm going to do, I've come back up to the other side of the brim. I'm going to do a little decrease to help me kind of skip over here and create a nice smooth line. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch, into that stitch there, pull up a loop. And then I'm going to go into the side of that first row of the brim. So I'm just going to insert there, pull up a loop, and now I'm going to decrease. See how I'm going to bring all of these 3 loops together. And now I'm going to work up the side of this end of the brim. So just trying to find a spot where I can insert my hook. It's not always that easy to see, especially because you've got your chain ones where we turned. So just try your best. So there's a nice spot there. The goal is to smooth out these little raggedy edges here. So my next one is going to be here. And then there. So, I mean, essentially we have 9 rounds, so you would hope to have 9 stitches, but you might have 10, you might have 8. It's not the end of the world. Just do the best that we can. And so now we're coming up to, so there we go. So that is what we want to see. We want to see a nice smooth transition. So I'm just coming up to the top here, and I've got probably one more part. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch right to the end here. Okay, and that's going to give me a nice smooth transition. Okay, so when I turn my brim, just like that, now you can see, look at that. That looks so good. So now we have a nice smooth edge, and it's going to give it a little bit more curl, which is exactly what we want. So right here, I'm going to snip my yarn, and I'm going to pull that through. And I'm just going to weave in my ends here just to smooth this out a little bit so that it doesn't look like an obvious end point there. Okay, so you guys know how much I like to make these disappear. So I'm just going to take this here, and this time I'm going to go right down the center here just to try and make that end disappear. Just like that. Good. Okay. And now I'm just going to weave this in to kind of get it to disappear down at the end here. So let me just weave in my ends, and I'm going to show you the final result of our ball cap. Okay guys, so here it is. This is the ball cap. Now I have made a little discovery, and that is that I made the body too long. And even though I followed the measurements of the hat sizing chart, we have to remember that that usually will refer to beanies that are meant to fully cover the ear. And I think if I hadn't done the pony opening and I had stopped here at round 11, no, I think it was round 9. If I had stopped at round 9, it would have been okay. I mean, it covers the ears, which is fine, but it just looks like it comes way too far down over the forehead. So, I mean, for an adult, a full adult, it would probably be fine for that depth, but that is my little boo-boo. If I were doing this again for the child size, I would do probably even three rounds less, especially if you want to add the pony hole here. See, look at how low that sits. So it really should sit a little higher. So this is kind of a good learning thing for you guys to see how sometimes, even though the most well thought out plan doesn't always go as to plan, but all in all, the shaping of this hat did come out the way that I liked. So you've got nice round shaping at the top. You've got the brim that came out really nicely. It's curved down the way I like. So it's perfect. It's just that it's too far down. So I will make sure to leave some notes as we do the video along, which probably at this point you would have already seen the notes. And yeah, so that is that. This is June's hat, which is the ball cap. And so at least I hope that you understand the basic components of creating this hat. So you've got to get the crown, then you work the body or the depth. And so I would go less over more, right? Because it's not necessarily a cold weather hat. Now, if you wanted to make this for the winter and design it to look like a baseball cap, then actually this depth will work out perfectly. I just would leave out, I mean, I guess you could keep the pony hole, but I would leave it as is because then you can fully cover the ear, and then you've got a little brim this way too, which you might like. If you're doing this for the summer, because it is June, then I would shorten it by about 3 rounds or even 4, okay? But I'm pretty happy with the length of the brim. I think it's a good length. It gives you plenty of shade, okay? And we have a nice curved edge there. So I'm pretty happy with that. And like I said, this brim, you could work this exact same formula for this size right up to a full adult. And if you're working it for a smaller size, your initial stitch count will just go, you just want to make it 1/3 of the whole circumference of the hat, 1/3 of the stitches. That's generally my gauge there. Okay, well, I'm somewhat satisfied with this hat, but also gained a valuable crochet lesson, which I hope to pass on to you guys. And I hope that you can appreciate having learned that along with me. So for sure, you're going to have questions about this hat. So please do leave them for me in the comment box down below. And if there are some of you guys that have done these types of hats before, and you can jump in and help a fellow crocheter, please do make sure to reply to those comments if you get to them before I do. So make sure to do that. And of course, if you would like to email me directly with your question, you can certainly do that. And you can do that at info@crochetcrafty.com. And make sure to go onto the website. That is where you're going to find that sizing chart, as well as a bunch of other sizing charts and resource tools for any of your other crochet projects. So make sure to do that. It's crochetcrafty.com. And hey, come say hi to me. I am on 2 of the socials, Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me there at the Stitch Sessions. So make sure to tag me and come and say hello. So guys, that is it for today's tutorial. I'm actually really looking forward to some feedback on this particular project. Like maybe some of you have done lots of ball caps before and you've got a lot to offer in terms of perspective on this project. So please do start having a conversation down in the comments. I think we could do more with this type of crochet hat project, and I look forward to seeing more of your feedback regarding that. All right, so next week we will have another fun and fabulous crochet tutorial for you. So make sure to join me back here next Wednesday morning. And if you are new here, I invite you to press that subscribe button and come hang out with me every Wednesday when I upload a brand new tutorial. So for now, I hope you have an amazing day. Happy crocheting as always, and remember to take really good care of yourselves. And I'll see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.